Hi, this is Mike Spivey with the Spivey Consulting Group, and I promised a podcast on what you all call now doxing yourself. It's a new word to me. We used to call it for many years outing yourself. But basically, when you give enough information online that admissions officers can figure out who you are. There's a couple components within that sentence. The one that I want to start with is when you give enough information online, because it's a lot easier than you realize for admissions officers to figure out who someone is. They are looking at any given time, they can pull up a ton of data on you. Not just your GPA and your scores, your gender, your race, where you're from, where you went to high school, where you went to college, but anything you said in your application. People reveal, understandably, in fact intentionally, mindfully, a great amount of information in their application. That can be cross-referenced with anything you say online, and over time, those data points start adding up. We personally at my firm have figured out we can figure out who our clients are posting online, and sometimes if we think they're threatening to harm themselves by things they say, and that'll be my second point, what are the things you can say that would harm yourself? We red flag them for themselves. We say, you need to make another account and delete that account or put that account to rest. Okay, so what are the things that you can say and what are the things that you can't say? Let me start off with what you can say. I mentioned this online to one person who was a little worried. Schools aren't reading every Reddit thread, reading every Reddit poster, and trying to figure out who every single poster is. And for that matter, and this should be reassuring to you, it's very rare when you get a law school application that you stop what you're doing and you Google the person's name on the application to see if there's anything nefarious or questionable online. You don't have the time. When you're reading 100 applications a day, you don't have the time for any of that. So these two go hand in hand. What schools are doing is they're in the message boards searching their school's name to see what's being said about them. It's no different, to be completely forthright, as me going in there from time to time and typing Spivey in the search thing to make sure some person isn't making things up about my firm or attacking my firm. That's happened. We've had people, non-clients, go in there and make up wild stories, and we've had to track those people down and, send them a message and saying, this is against the law. Incidentally, that can happen with schools. If you make up something about a school, there's a scenario where you might get a scary letter or at least an email. And the reference I gave, we always send an email, please stop making things up. An incredibly astute, like CIA level observer on Reddit would notice that I very rarely use school names on Reddit. That's exactly why, what I just alluded to. If I said a law school's name, if I said University of Florida Law, those are the kinds of things that people at University of Florida are typing in to read what people are saying about their school. So I almost always say things like Westeros Law School or Princeton Law School. So even though I don't think admissions officers take much time to listen to my podcast, just for the sake of continuity, I'll say, if you were to type something about Princeton Law School, so the thread title is Still Waiting on Princeton, that is probably going to be read by at least one admissions officer, maybe all the admissions officers at our hypothetical, theoretical Princeton Law School. So let's say in the thread you say, I'm a little bit annoyed. I have a 3.9 and a 173, both above Princeton Law School's medians. I see a lot of other people getting admitted, and I haven't been admitted yet. Well, there's a lot even in that statement. So to begin with, schools do it all differently, but they send admits out in batches. I had a client a couple of weeks ago who wasn't in the first Harvard interview wave, but we knew, just based on the strength of her application, the quality of her person, the strength of her numbers, we knew she was going to get one. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, boom, there it went. In that case, the batches weren't sent out entirely based on quality of application and certainly not on quality of numbers. Same thing with our hypothetical, theoretical Princeton Law School. They're going to send out waves of admits anywhere from, if you're a UVA or a Duke, Arizona State, September, all the way to March, April. And that's just waves. And then in the summer, there's not as many waves of admits. but there are, on a weekly basis, a number of admits. So you're amped up, you're nervous, you see other people online getting admitted and you haven't. And you say something like, those morons at Princeton are going slowly. Well, the people at Princeton Law don't appreciate being called morons. I might do a second podcast or a second part of this podcast about overly sensitive people online, because I see it all the time. I see it from deans of law schools on Twitter. And I just don't understand why people get hyped up by strangers, but I do see it all the time. And that's another thing that could end up hurting you all. But right now, let me just focus on doxing yourself. So now that person at Princeton, particularly if they're sensitive, was just called a moron. Now they're not searching Princeton law. There's a possibility they are reading every single post you've written over the last however much time they have, depending on how amped up they are and how sensitive they are. They could go to your profile and just read back and back and back and back. You can't block them, by the way. I've tried to block people. There are people on Reddit who I would rather not read my messages because they exhibit unusual behavior towards me. Reddit has a horrible block mechanism. All the block does is it blocks you from seeing their posts, not the way it should do. It doesn't block people from seeing your posts. So they can see everything you have posted and everything you will post. Herein lies the crux of the problem. So let me summarize. You say something negative about Princeton Law, they weren't looking for you. They were reading about feedback about their law school, because feedback is great. Message boards are a great source for information for law schools. All of a sudden you say one thing that you think is innocent, innocuous, not a big deal, but it upsets someone, and now for the rest of this cycle, they're keyed in on you. 4 months later, let's say you still haven't been admitted to Princeton Law. Let's say you say online, I'm hoping because of my numbers to get 25 or 30,000 from Princeton a year in merit aid, because I see that people in my numbers, that's generally how much they get. I'm not going to go to Princeton. They've been so slow and I never really liked them. Certainly don't like their admissions office. But I am going to use that money to try to get more money out of another law school. That is the inflection point where all of a sudden you're not admitted. I'm not saying this happens to every person that does that, but this certainly has happened. 3 months earlier, 4 months earlier, 2 months earlier, you said something rather innocent. Someone started paying attention to what you say about their law school. You just doxed yourself to the point of losing an admission. Why would you ever risk that? So there's two things you can do here. One is you can give slightly false information about yourself. I have a 162 and a 3.7 when you have a 163 and a 3.8. You would be surprised then how difficult it all of a sudden becomes for admissions officers to figure out you are with those slight changes. Those slight changes really throw them off because they're looking at their data. They're not like at the NSA level looking for extenuations of that data. Or you can just not dox yourself at all. Don't mention things. Don't mention the schools you've been admitted to. Don't mention your stats. There's a second option, which you would have to have a level of sophistication, I think, beyond most people. There are people with good admissions instincts. You could actually intentionally dox yourself. Let's say that UVA was your dream school. You could early cycle give enough information so that UVA could figure out who you are and say things like, if I'm admitted to UVA, not only am I going to go, I'm going to be an ambassador there and help with their admissions process and stuff like that. Okay, so now you're doing the opposite. You're intentionally outing yourself to have an admissions officer figure out who you are because you have a dream school that you hope identifies you. I have never once in all my time doing this, thousands upon applicants I've talked to, not when I was in admissions, but on this side of things, never once recommended that strategy. I have humorously thought about it in my own context. What would I do if I were applying to law school? Given what I know from my 20 plus years of doing this, there are many things I could say. I could operationalize that would probably be keen for admissions officers to hear. I'm going to do a part 2, and I'm going to talk about the second deleterious, nefarious poor consequences that can come from talking online. And that's going to be more of the people getting riled up and into these long, everyone has seen it, these long arguments that no one else cares about between you and another person online, or saying just really sort of disgusting things that in the past have kept people out of law school. I hope this was helpful. Someone asked for it. This is Mike Spivey at the Spivey Consulting Group. Cycles are long and full of terrors, to quote Game of Thrones. If you're feeling down, again, don't vent online. I started this blog because I talk every year to lots of people who get hit by the cycle and go through ups and downs. www.spiveyblog.com. It just has quotes and sort of inspirational, motivational pieces that if you're ever feeling down, I would encourage you maybe to read those. Reach out to one of us at my firm. Don't complain online. Again, there's a scenario where people have figured out who you are. Again, I hope this was helpful. Thanks.